the end of this part of the meeting. And Kim will give me the high sign here in a minute or two, and we can start the regular meeting.
You can go ahead and call to order the regular meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. It's nice meeting you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is the regular meeting of the Transportation Advisory Committee for Oregon City for December 15th, 2020. I'm calling it to order and ask Kim to take the roll.
All right. Ray Atkinson,
President.
John Anderson,
Present.
Ben Simmons,
Present.
Tim West,
I'm here.
Bob LaSalle,
He's muted.
He's muted.
he's muted, but he's here.
Sorry about that. I'm unmuted in here.
Okay. Henry McEnroth,
Here.
Chetamir Jessic,
Here.
and Vance Tong is not going to be here tonight.
So Kim, would you take us through the agenda then?
Sure. So does anybody have anything they want to change about the agenda? No?
I brought up an item presented to John Lewis about a discussion about the Metro proposal to turn the Oregon City Old Bridge into a pedestrian and bike path. So just wanted to have a brief discussion on that.
Yeah, I was just going to add it as part of the Public Works report. Tim, is that okay with you?
Yeah, no problem, just as long as we talk about it.
Yeah, good.
Okay. I did not receive any public comments, which then brings us to the next item, which will be Laura Turway presenting the update to the guidelines for the transportation impact analysis. Laura, I will make you co-host. It's probably just easier.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Laura Turway. I am the Community Development Director for the City of Oregon City, which means that I support our planning and our building departments. Share my screen with you real quick. All right. I am here to talk to you tonight about, oops, there we go, proposed amendments to the traffic impact analyses, which kind of sounds a little bit wordy, but really it's some minor amendments to the policy that we use to determine what should be in a traffic study, not what the criteria for approval is or how much congestion is okay, just what needs to be in the study itself. And we hadn't updated it in quite a bit of time, but we had made changes to references in the code and things like that. So this is a rather minor update that we did. All right, before we get into the item in too great of detail, I did want to talk to you a little bit about development and the many steps that development takes as it goes through the process. As you're probably aware, it takes a long time to plan for growth and go through the development process. Nowadays, it starts with concept plans and expansions of the urban growth boundary. That process, they'll take a high level look at infrastructure, such as traffic, and identify sort of what the general impacts will be for a proposed area when it is urbanized. So generally what the zoning kind of may be. And then from that, we sort of infer what the traffic impacts and utility infrastructure impacts will be as well. So at that point, we don't have a lot of knowns of exactly what the traffic impact would be. We have a lot of knowns of the reasonable worst case scenario of what it could be, but exactly how many houses will really be constructed is more of a range. And so some of those impacts are analyzed at such a higher level. Then after we do that, we have citywide and regional plans, and those plans now know that we have a range of homes or development that is proposed for a certain area. And we make sure that that is contemplated when we look at those. So TSP, so include traffic impacts from proposed development that would happen. So if you take the Beaver Creek Road concept plan as an example, once we do the concept plan, we know a general idea of what's going there, or a worst case scenario of what may go there. And we make sure that when we did our TSP that we accounted for that development within that. Then after that, there's time of annexation, and annexation really doesn't have much of an impact on development because, or in this case, traffic, because it's really just changing taxing districts, and maybe a water provider or something like that may change, but you aren't allowed to do much if you don't change the zoning designation, which is the next step. So annexation on its own takes, I don't know, 8 months or so to complete. Zone change is the next step. Sometimes it is included with annexation. Lately, it seems to not be. But zone change is really where you're going to see a big increase in impact as the development occurs. You'll get a little bit more certainty as they settle in on a zoning designation as far as what the impacts will be. And then after they're in the city, then they can do development. Sometimes there's a master plan that happens, and sometimes there's not a master plan that happens. So I just want to acknowledge that we analyze infrastructure numerous times this process. The development process alone takes a year, and that's excluding construction. So this whole timeline for urbanization and development is really quite lengthy. So it's certainly many few years or so, and there's public involvement throughout. So what we're talking about is at these stages of development, what does that traffic study look like, and what should be included in the traffic study? And that is what our traffic impact analyses tell us. So it's a policy which is that tells us what should be included in this technical engineering study. They analyze traffic impact of development. They look at things like the volume of traffic impact as well as the impact on our system. So if a development's going to occur, how many auto trips or trips does that put on our system? And is that okay? Or does it create problems that need to be mitigated? Again, this policy doesn't include actual criteria for development. It's just how to assemble the traffic study itself, which is why we're looking at adoption of it through a little bit of a different process, which is not formally coming up through a legislative process through a planning commission. There's two types of studies. There's a TAL, the traffic analysis letter, which is a sort of quick study for small development. And then there's a traffic impact study if you're doing larger development, or if you're doing smaller development in areas that we are concerned about, such as near the intersection of Beaver Creek and 213, there's going to be more expected of you than a small one. So examples of information included in a TIS include background information. So I want to know what's going on today. What are the assumptions for change in the future? Are there other development that were approved, or projects for transportation improvements that are funded but are not built? And then there's also, we look forward as well. So what are you proposing to do? What's the traffic volume and trip impacts generally from that application? And then how are you assuming distribution of those trips? How does that affect intersections nearby or not nearby, depending on the volume of the development? What is your circulation and parking like? Some of the things we're looking at there is making sure that you don't back out into the right of way, or the main cause of protection is to protect the right of way in general. Also, what's your queuing like? If you have a drive-through Dutch Bros, what does that look like on site? Is it, again, causing problems? And then are there problems that are being created, and are there ways in which we can mitigate or avoid those problems? In traffic analysis or reports, there's a variety of information that's provided to in the report. So they're always really long. And we take these reports, and the city has a transportation consultant. And so they review them. And then we also have staff review them as well. And then we put them with development review process. And so there's an opportunity for the public to review. And so if there is concerns about traffic impact of a development, you can see the intersection analysis and the crash history sheets and those sort of things. Not a lot of people actually look at that information, but it's certainly there for people to utilize if they want to. So the proposed revisions that we're intending to make are really rather minor. So what happened was we changed our code, and we changed our code a few times since we've last touched these, and the references are now bad and need to be updated. We updated our transportation system plan since this was last updated, and so we need to make sure that those cross references and priorities are also updated. Another thing that we did since this was last updated was adopt alternate mobility standards. And so for some intersections, we replaced a level of service analysis for traffic impact with a V over C analysis. And we did that with our TSP. And then we also accepted an alternate mobility standard for for Beaver Creek and 213, or places where we knew we weren't able to meet the acceptable level of congestion or mobility. We added some references to multimodal transportation, which is in our TSP as well. And then we added exemptions to really clarify that if you're going to do an accessory dwelling unit, which is like a mother-in-law unit or a lot line adjustment, you're not really having any impact on the transportation system, you don't need to do that analysis. Some other changes that we made are adding a qualification for an engineer who prepares the study to be certified in Oregon, and then also a requirement to show their driveway width, spacing, and site obstructions in their study as well. And then we extended the crash history from 3 to 4 years. And then there's some other really more minor clarifications that we had. We did go to the city commission with it, but I forgot to send it to TAC. And so now I am here. So as city commission, I asked for more time so I could come and chat with you. You guys don't actually review transportation studies, which is why I hadn't thought about it sooner, but it would make sense to come chat with you. So that's why I'm here. So sorry I didn't come sooner, but I am here now. The city commission provided some comments of things that they want us to look into or to change. And so we are looking into those. Not all of those comments can actually be incorporated, but a lot of them can. So our next step is to go back to the city commission on January 6th, and we're proposing adoption of these proposed changes by resolution. And I wanted to thank Ray because you had asked me a lot of good questions through a couple of emails. So I want to thank you for reading it. I really believe that the more eyes, the better when we do most of our work, actually, all of our work. So thanks for that. But I'm here to answer any questions. I don't need any formal motion of recommendation or anything. If you want to, you can. But what I'm really looking for is just making sure that this, you understand what this is, and if you have any comments or any recommendations or anything like that. But our intent was to be more surgical and just update it to comply with our current code, our current TSP, to make sure that there is more clarity and certainty at development.
So, Laura, the first question I would have is, is this just strictly a housekeeping type action, or is there some actual substantial changes other than that?
In my opinion, it's more housekeeping than substantial. The only real substantial thing we did was increase the crash history by a year. I would say that was the most substantial, but I think it's pretty housekeeping, pretty light.
Ray, what did you think of it?
Well, as a transportation planner, I was taking the bicycle pedestrian safety lens to it because I have, I guess, a concern in America that it's very auto dependent and how traffic studies are done. And so and level of service analysis usually is very auto dependent where, it's if you decrease the level of service and usually that's bad. But in my mind, it means that it's safety because if you don't widen the road, then yeah. But it sounds like from this update, it's not really decision making. It's more about what data is collected through the process. So it probably is a different area that I needed to work on with changes to level of service because that's a whole nother process. But from the updates sound like it's good for data collection side of things because I don't think this involves actual decision making process from what I understand with PowerPoint slides. Is that correct?
Right, it's just what should be in that study.
Okay.
If we were to change criteria, we would have to go through a legislative process, and so we didn't do any of that. We just want to make sure that this met our code, MTSP.
Someday I like to change things, but that's a whole nother process.
I have a question, Henry.
Go.
This may be addressing more criteria than this, but was there any thought given to the effects of the cumulative effect on transportation as developments occur?
That's a good question. We do look at the cumulative effects, particularly with our regional plans, but really it's our transportation system plan, which is where in the TSP, we assume full build out of the city within our horizon, which is a 20-year horizon. And we put it into a metro model and assume everywhere else is doing the same because, as you know, in Oregon City, we get a lot of pass-through trips too, and we're not an island of ourselves. And so that's the case where you can run the models and determine if there are any intersections that are failing or something like that. And then if there are failing intersections, then we'll come up with capital projects or we'll identify projects or solutions to fix those intersections. And then you'll see some capital improvement projects or come off that as well. And so some of that will fund or be projects identified in system development charges. So we do take a look at it at that high level, and that helps us avoid the death by 1,000 cuts. One thing I would acknowledge though, is that we accept congestion in a certain level of congestion. And there may be a disconnect about what people's expectation ought to be and what we allow. And I see sometimes in public comments that get written in or people that attend planning commission that express a displeasure with the level of how long it takes to get around town. I'm hoping that it would take less time to get around town. But as a community and as part of the region, there is a general acceptance of congestion. I think one thing that we have to balance transportation with is all of the other needs of the community, like housing and how much we grow and efficiency of services and things like that and quality of life. And so transportation is a really hard thing to look at by itself because it's never by itself. But that was a really long-winded answer to say the TSP is that place where we do the wholesale analysis, and then we'll catch those, the impacts for an intersection way down the road that you only put 20 trips into instead of 25. And so we will catch that through the TSP, ideally.
You touched briefly on one of my points, but I would just leave it because I'm not about to open that can of worms again. John, I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, Laura, there's two products you're looking for here, and that's the traffic impact study and the transportation analysis letter, which I guess is for smaller projects. Is it clear to the homeowner or to the people who aren't well-versed in this? What tells you which of those two categories you're in?
Yes and no. The yes, I would say, is in the guidelines. It has clear metrics for how many trips you're going to put on the system, and that will determine that you can get this easier TAL, which is, the shorter, quicker analysis. However, the no part is when you're in an area that we know is unsafe or that we have concerns about, or that you're near places where we have alternate mobility targets in place. And that, in those cases, we do have the ability to make anyone do the stronger analysis, because we know that all those little things we're a little bit more sensitive to. We just want to make sure that we take extra care.
One of the things that Metro and Oregon City Planning been working on is permitting more, I don't get the acronym right, but the granny apartments where you have a separate unit on. And I think you change it so that at certain places you can have duplexes, maybe even triplexes. Would those generally be low enough to be in the TAL category rather than the other one? Or in other words, we're trying to make it easier to get these things developed and with a little more density. But as you add density, you're going to trigger the other study, the more comprehensive study.
Yeah, that's a good question. So for the granny in-laws, the accessory dwelling units, the smaller version of a house at your house in the backyard or up or downstairs or something like that. With that was one of the questions from the City Commission as well. And so no, we don't make anyone do traffic impact studies for a single family house, and also not for an ADU, which is generally determined to be less of an impact than a single family house either. There is provisions in place with House Bill 2001 that was passed that have specific prohibitions against doing things like that for some types of uses, including ADUs as well. I think when you're talking about 3 and 4plexes, there may be a time when potentially we would want a TAL, which is why we didn't specifically add it to the exemptions list. Everything else is on the exemptions list, but the 3 and the 4 aren't, because 3 and the 4plexes are zoning wise probably going to be near more major roads or something like that. We may want to look at more sight distance at the driveway, or more, we might look at something, but that something is not going to be like an intersection way down the road. It's going to be something a little bit more local.
Thank you.
Yeah, good question.
I do have one that I will ask, which is how much of multimodal pedestrian and bicycle and skateboard type transportation can be put into these reviews so that we can expand what we call transportation beyond, as Ray says, the family car?
That's a good question. We do, multimodal will come up in our TSP and in these analysis, but they're really generally, I would say, geared towards automotive. But what I can say is sometimes you'll get a development and when we do these letters to determine what the impact is, we use specific guidelines, a manual that was adopted. And these help us determine alternatives to that manual and impact. So for example, say housing developments happening, and it's limited on who the rent is. So maybe it's only geared towards people who make a smaller income and may not be able to afford cars, and it's near a transit line and all of these things. So these guidelines give us the ability to account for that and not make them overbuild a parking lot. We do have other provisions in the zoning code. If you're doing something like an apartment complex, that you'll have to have pedestrian amenities be oriented towards the street. And then broader than that, our zoning and our comprehensive plan does encourage higher densities pretty much always because of the efficiency of services, but particularly near areas of higher transit and things like that.
So how do we get sidewalks installed and that sort of thing?
Our development code requires installation of sidewalks at every time of development. And so as development happens, we'll do the analysis. One thing that we need to be careful of when we do that analysis is proportionality. So I'm talking more above ADUs. So say you're building a new house. We have provision in our code that 10% of the construction costs be put towards public improvements. If you're doing like a land division, you generally always have to do things like sidewalk and improvements there. There are cases where maybe you have an enormous lot and you're on a corner and there's lots of sidewalks, and maybe that isn't okay to require full sidewalks in all places. But I think it's an interesting point you bring up, which is who pays for improvement to infrastructure. Our development code is geared towards making development pay for infrastructure, but we have so many, sorry, John, but we have so many gaps in our existing system and places where existing infrastructure never made the improvements in the first place. And so the code in general just has people mitigate for the impact that they have and not also improve for other people who never did in the first place. So John's left with the bag of how to improve existing conditions for people who are not proposing development.
And one last point that I'll ask about, and now that we got you and John both here because it's kind of both your bailiwicks, is when you have a corner lot and there's a frontage facing one street and a frontage facing the other street, who gets that little bit on the corner where there is no frontage, where the handicap ramp goes and where the potholes occur sometimes and nobody fixes them?
Well, my answer to that is our code doesn't differentiate those areas from your other frontage, Henry. So it is a challenge. I noticed that as a pedestrian, lots of the development that has happened over the years, especially the newer development. So you're in an area that's got a lot of years to it, but in some of the newer areas, some of these ADA ramp and corner improvements are significant. There may be a curb extension included in that. And so I have a question in my mind when somebody has, typically we don't see the trip hazards there because the street trees are, a ways
Elsewhere.
from there, right? But over time, we're still going to see problems and need for improvement to those. And I do think that that's going to become an issue. Right now, though, our code just talks about, the property owners responsible for their sidewalk fronting their home. And but those we find when we do the paving projects around them, and we're upgrading those ADA ramps as a piece of the annual pavement program, those ADA corners, they're upwards of it's getting more expensive, $6,000-7,000 a piece to replace those and do it right. So that's a long answer, but that's my answer.
I have one more question. Why do they allow a fee in lieu of, for example, a sidewalk that the developer is allowed to pay a fee in lieu of, rather than actually putting the sidewalk in. And I've been told that the fee in lieu of would be the same cost as putting the sidewalk. So why do they allow developers to pay those fees in lieu of rather than putting the sidewalk in if we need more sidewalks? Or I guess I don't expect an answer from you right now, but I would like that addressed at some point in time.
John, you want to catch it or you want me to?
Yeah, I'll take a run at that and see. Sometimes it makes sense, Bob, because of future planning for that facility. Other times, the grading of the sidewalk, for instance, is not really appropriate for the adjacent areas. So that, there may be engineering specific reasons for why we wouldn't necessarily require that sidewalk improvement. Typically, we wouldn't do if their impact was high enough to call for offsite improvements. We typically wouldn't accept fee in lieu for that. There's a variety of scenarios where we've accepted fee in lieu, and I don't know them all, but there's times when that applies just because it doesn't make sense to complete that piece of the sidewalk right then, and that's usually got to do with more engineering related reasons than any other reason. Maybe we've got something on the capital plan, something like that. If you have a specific, maybe I could answer that or not and get back to you on it, but that's generally why. Normally, we're always advocating for installation of the sidewalk or replacement of the sidewalk, but there's instances where we would say, well, rather than do that, just pay the fee in lieu.
Well, I do have a specific. It's that one property on Holcomb Boulevard there that faces Holcomb Boulevard. And I was explained that if they put a sidewalk in, it wouldn't connect with anybody else's sidewalk anyway. So they allowed the fee in lieu of. Well, I know that when I built my house, I wasn't connecting to anybody else's sidewalk, but they required me to put a sidewalk in. So I think that, I want to be as tactful as I can, but there are some disparities there that I think should be addressed. And we can talk about that offline.
Yeah, I think that sometimes there is some subjectivity into that, to be honest, Bob, that makes, that is questionable. Holcomb, one of the things that we're noticing with the rapid flashing beacon project in particular is, we haven't done a corridor plan to figure out exactly what the lane width should be, whether there's buffered bike lanes or straight bike lanes or, how wide the sidewalk is, but yet, there's a development that's happening, or in this case, there's a desire for rapid flashing beacons. So staff has to kind of go through that analysis to figure out, wonder where that curb or sidewalk line really should be. And, we're going to go ahead and do that for Holcomb because that's the direction we've been given. Now, this other piece, and I'm not exactly sure where it is, but that may have been staff's decision was, man, there's no sidewalk anywhere along this section. We don't know exactly what our road section should be or whether there's any, minor or major alignment changes. So rather than, put that one piece of sidewalk out there that we don't know the best grade for it to be at, where exactly, we might know what the alignment is just because Holcomb's not likely to change in terms of, its curvature, but, how wide, how far over that sidewalk should be. So my sense is that's why. I don't know that I was involved in that particular decision, but I think that's the kind of thinking that goes on, right, wrong, or indifferent, and there is some subjectivity that plays into that.
Thank you.
Hey, John, you did bring up one thing's been brought up, and I would like to have it for a future meeting. Could you tell us how this in lieu of fee is tracked and whether it ever gets applied to a project?
Well, yes, we typically have, finance has a spreadsheet, if you will. So those are kept in a particular account, and they track it by property address or development, depending on which it is. And that stays there. And normally we, SDCs are a little different in that SDCs, you pay an SDC, it doesn't necessarily mean that money goes specifically for your neighborhood, right? We collect a citywide SDC, we identify a project, and we use that money to pay for the development project. But these fee and lieu, we do try to maintain them in the neighborhoods that they were collected in, and make sure that when we're doing a project like that, and I would say over the last 3, maybe 4 years, we've gotten a lot better about recognizing where those fee and lieu are, between some of the work that Wyatt Arno and his group did to ask questions about, hey, we've got this bank of money out here, but we didn't, engineering staff with turnover, we didn't necessarily know that money existed. So now we have that in a much more organized form, and something that we look at a lot more closely. So that's that. In theory, if you're going to collect money for a fee and lieu for a sidewalk on Holcomb, we'll pull that money when we build a sidewalk in Holcomb.
Yeah, I asked the question because I couldn't remember ever using that money in any of the projects I did for the city.
I have a question about the level of service to mobility standards transition. Is what's written in the document, is that mean it's new as of this document, or is that brought in from previous adoption?
When we did the transportation system plan, which was adopted in 2013, or maybe it was done in 2013, adopted 2014, anyway, 2013, 2014, we decided to change we were a level of service, which is a grade that identifies expectations of delay for a driver. And we use that exclusively for all of our intersection types, whether it was signalized or not, big street, small street. And so when we did the TSP, we changed to have our regional and larger streets go to a V over C volume to capacity ratio rather than level of service. And so that happened in 2013 or 2014. The reason for that was because ODOT was doing it. And so a lot of other cities you saw follow suit, because they felt as though, one, it's easier to calculate, but it applies better to these larger roadways. And we have a lot of we have some ODOT roadways in our system, so we already have to do it for those ones as well. The level of service, though, still applies better to these smaller roadways rather than changing those over to V over C, because we have an expectation that we'll keep the larger roadways moving. And so that congestion, or it's okay for people to wait on a side street before turning onto a main street. And so when you do that in level of service, it doesn't calc as well. It's more accurate to go the other way, from my understanding, not a transportation engineer. So that happened with TSP, but then later, I can't remember when, a couple of years ago, we adopted the alternate mobility targets. And so we also wanted to incorporate that. So that was Beaver Creek in 2013, where we essentially upped the level of acceptable congestion for that intersection because we couldn't identify a solution to fix the intersection at the volume to capacity ratio that we had previously.
Is there interest to go beyond 213 Beaver Creek for that acceptable congestion rating? Because for me, like, I think for bike ped safety, that if, I'm okay, I think it's okay to have more congested roads if you provide safer roads by having more congested roads. And so I just, in future, it'd be nice, I think, to think about expanding beyond that one intersection to make it not citywide, but just make it where bike ped safety concerns are included in the congestion discussion, which I think maybe done more in just one intersection.
Yeah, I remember when we did the TSP, and John was in on it too, so you can comment as well. We were thinking about, should we do transportation impact studies differently? Should we start to look at how many pedestrians come onto site and those sorts of things? And back then, we weren't there yet. Now there's more info out. I wonder when we redo our TSP, how that conversation may change.
Thank you.
If there's no other questions, I'd like to say thank you and move on.
All right. Is there anything you would like me to communicate to the city commission when I go back to them? Or just tell them we visited?
But I think the main point that we would be all in agreement is that more incorporation of multimodal transportation opportunities need to be incorporated, and probably not at this particular point, because that would mean going back and starting over from scratch.
Okay, good. So we did include it in here. So it sounds like you're supportive of that. And then as we move forward into the next TSP, keep that in mind.
That would be the way it would probably work, because in order to do the amount of discussion and evaluation and whatever, you'd probably be 3 or 4 housekeeping changes down the road first. And so you might as well clear up what minor confusions you have now and save the big change for when we have to do it anyway.
Perfect. Thank you.
Laura, I really liked your intro slide. By the way, I hadn't seen that inverted pyramid. But that's where I think folks struggle, because they get notice. They get plenty of notice of the development, right? They may have gotten notice of a TSP, amendment, back in 2012 or 13 when we did that, and they didn't get involved, and they really don't understand that. But what they do understand is when the development comes a knocking, and they start seeing development on the site, right? Site clearing, for instance, or for sale signs or whatever. They start hearing about it in the neighborhood, and that's when they are ready to act. And they, this question about this accumulation of trips, I think they don't necessarily know that the modeling and the analysis that goes into full build out of the city happens much earlier in a much bigger plan. So I think your inverted pyramid there describes that. Whether folks get it or not, I don't know, but I thought it looked good. I really appreciated seeing that.
I agree,
Thanks.
it's helpful. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys for volunteering in your time for Oregon City. I appreciate it. What else would you want to do on a Tuesday night?
Al, I don't think you want to ask that question.
Thank you.
Yeah, at least there's not any football games on.
All right, so I just realized that when I started the meeting that I jumped over the approval of minutes. So would somebody like to approve them, or the minutes from the November 17th meeting?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and move those as is.
And I'll second it if no one else will.
All right.
All in favor of adopting the minutes, say aye or raise your hands or something.
Aye.
Ayes, hands, okay. All opposed? All abstentions? It looks like it passed.
All right, and now we're going to move into the Public Works report, which John Lewis will be giving updates on some items.
So let me start by saying, we committed to keeping your meeting short tonight because it was December and it's a holiday season, and we've completely failed on that front. So I'll start with an apology on that, but I thought that update from Laura was excellent. And I hope, these, to me, those transportation, that the standards or guidelines for how we review and require transportation studies to be performed in Oregon City is mostly helpful for staff and the development community to better understand what they need and make sure we get what we want and that they do kind of understand what they need to provide. And, you know, so I thought that was well worth it, and I'm glad that we brought it back to the TAC. But for me, under here, there was this Park Place transportation update, and something that I think the Park Place neighborhood asked that we include in the in our TAC update. So I don't have a slide for this or notes, but I kind of wanted to share some things that are going on in Park Place neighborhood with regard to updates. So I'll just go through the list here. Holcomb Boulevard rapid flashing beacons. I talked about that a little bit, where we've hired a consultant team to do the field work, survey work, analysis work, and design work. And our expectation is we would see the city commission approving a recommendation to move forward with a construction contract in early May. So that's our goal. We're hoping we can get to that, and I think we're on track to do that. That would probably put construction of those rapid flashing beacons in the summer. And I get that, you know, it seems like we ought to just be able to design those and throw those things up. I'll tell you, based on the one that we're doing on Berkeley Hills, we did try and get that one done kind of with minimal design work and kind of a accelerated schedule. And it has not turned out to be, you know, probably the right thing to have done because we're struggling with the completion of that project. Although that should be online pretty soon. In fact, I heard today or tomorrow they might have some of the actual flashing beacon equipment at Berkeley Hills in place. But we definitely want to get the Holcomb ones in place and done right. So we're making progress on that. The Holcomb Boulevard speed limit, we're again still in the queue with the fires and the pandemic. That combination with a very small Oregon Department of Transportation team who reviews speed limit or does speed limit studies, that has continued to be delayed. So we're still, you know, checking in with them from time to time. We fully anticipate that one is pretty far into the queue, as opposed to, say, Myers Road, which we just adopted an emergency speed limit on Myers Road because we hadn't heard that ODOT could get to that for some time. So we asked the city commission to adopt a speed limit on Myers Road, on the new section of Myers Road, of 30 miles an hour, and they adopted that for about a year. So we're hoping ODOT will be caught up and be able to do the speed study for Myers Road within that year's time frame. But Holcomb is still kind of hanging out there. I think, well, I don't have much more to say about that other than our hands are kind of in their schedule, and we'll keep checking with them.
What speed would Myers Road go up to if the speed study's not done within a year? Is it good like 35, or what speed?
No, it would just require the commission to come up with another temporary, I guess, ordinance. Right now it's an ordinance, so it would require another ordinance for that to happen. So the other project that's out there that we've talked about was the Safe Routes to School Infrastructure Grant. It was it was the bigger grant that we were pursuing. I forget the dollar amount of that right now, but we've been successful with grants. This one we weren't successful with, so we're disappointed about that. We have yet to really kind of get a full debrief from the Safe Routes to School committee who makes that decision, and I don't think they've finalized the ultimate projects that are on the list, but we know we weren't in that initial cut. So we just kind of wanted to share that. That doesn't necessarily mean these two projects that I talked about earlier, the two rapid flashing beacons on Holcomb, that won't affect those projects. But the rest of the project, which included additional sidewalk up near the school, and then a couple of more rapid flashing beacons up near Oak Tree Terrace and Winston, those would be those are affected. So we're still trying to figure out options, and we'll keep pursuing grant funding for that. But yeah, didn't get it this time. And I guess the other grant project that we didn't get was the park, what we call the Park Place Urbanization Study, which was a transportation and growth management grant. Weren't successful with that one either. We have moved forward with hiring a consultant to do that work. We budgeted a fair amount of money as our match anyway on that project, and we're just gonna scale back. We're going to try and get as much as we could. The intent for that was a lot of those streets that cross or are perpendicular to Holcomb Boulevard, and try to figure out, what those, some of them are fairly well built out, but this question about how to move pedestrians well through those, how to finish the sidewalk completions in those areas. Got a lot of sidewalks with mailboxes right in the middle of the sidewalk, so somebody in a wheelchair can't get around them. Figuring out bike lanes and bike lane configurations. And then for those areas that aren't built out, that are still kind of at a rural standard, what should that roadway section really look like? And so that's what that Park Place Urbanization Study is about. We'll do as much work as we can afford to do on the planning of that. It might not include as many streets as what we had originally intended, but we're going to move forward with that work anyway. And then another project that's out there that was in somewhat kind of a second thought with regard to the Safe Routes to School infrastructure grant, some of the concerns about these pedestrian crossings and homeowners having to cross Holcomb Boulevard. We have been reaching out, we're calling it the Holcomb Boulevard Mailbox Relocation Project. So it's working with the post office to get folks, get their mailboxes on their side of the street so that they don't have to necessarily cross Holcomb Boulevard. So it's kind of a common sense approach to the same concern that we have. We recognize that there's still this desire for more, sidewalks where there aren't sidewalks. This at least gets those sidewalks in a place where the post office is going to be safe to deliver their mail, and the homeowners will hopefully be able to avoid crossing the street. And I think that's true for every property owner along Holcomb, that they won't have to cross the street anymore. So that's another little project in the Park Place area. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that if you've got them.
Did you bring up the unfortunate incident on South End Road a couple of weeks ago?
I mean, you
When
think about that.
Well, the outside the city limits, lady was crossing the road in the middle in the evening to get her mail and got run over.
Oh, I didn't even hear about that, Henry.
Oh, yeah.
That's terrible news. That's terrible news. Well, how long ago was that, Henry?
About 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that.
It was outside the city, which is one of the reasons you probably hadn't heard about it. The only reason I knew about it is I read it in the paper.
Other than that, I did want to talk a couple things. I've got Tim's topic. I don't have a slide for it either, Tim, but I just kind of wanted to share a little bit of information about it. So this is regarding what the project is being called is Oregon City / Westland Pedestrian and Bicycle Bridge Concept Plan. And it's not a Metro project, by the way. It's an ODOT project. Metro, Clackamas County, the cities of Westland and Oregon City, and ODOT are participating in this study effort to figure out if there's a option for either a new bridge that would be a, pedestrian, bicycle, bridge that would be available for folks to use to get from Oregon City to West Lynn, somewhere either just downstream of the I-205 bridge all the way up to the falls. And one of the, I don't think you can do a study like that without considering an idea that has been out there for a while now from some in the community about the idea of converting the existing Highway 43 bridge, which is, narrow, to something that would handle only bikes and peds. And, some people hate that idea, some people love that idea, and then there's a lot of people in the middle. And so, the unfortunate piece is that was the one little concept or proposal out of this discussion about how to, Metro was having a conversation about how to fund this study. And that little piece of information came out in a newspaper article, and I think it hit our social media as well. So it added a lot of confusion to the community that we've been trying to, I guess, inform. But really, the purpose of the Oregon City West Lynn Pedestrian and Bicycle Bridge Concept Plan was to identify potential bridge locations and provide opportunities for the community and local agency conversations to reimagine a new crossing. And, I think some of this stemmed out of the fact that the state has not incorporated a bike and ped solution into the I-205 bridge widening project. And so that, and by law, I think they're required in any capital project to spend funding, incorporate an apportionment of that funding on bicycle and ped improvements. So
I'll just clarify that last part. ODOT presented to the Bike Ped Advisory Committee for Clackamas County, and they said that they're not required to follow the bike bill on the I-205 project. The 1% going to bike infrastructure because somehow they legally don't think they're required to comply with that law. So I just wanted to clarify that according to ODOT, they do not have to follow that law.
yeah, they may be right about that, but I still think that there's a public perception problem there. And I think it does kind of run contrary to, everything else that they do. So, anyway, more to come on this. The timeline for this is, they're starting to they put together a consultant contract. They're initiating the project and starting public engagement. So that will be, we've got a web page on it right now. And really, if you search for that, the web page address is super long. But I think if you look under Oregon City West Lynn Pedestrian Bridge Concept, you'll be able to get there. And it's really just a 2-page document at this point that's on our web page. I haven't looked at ODOT's to see if they've got something, but just know that that effort's gonna ramp up. They're looking for some advisory committees that would be participating in that. And if there's interest from the TAC, I assume there would be, we definitely can, I guess if tonight somebody wants to advocate, I'm almost positive Ray is. It sounds like maybe Tim might be interested in that. So they've got they've got a couple of teams on that. That so I don't know how many they're going to accept, but if it sounds like there's interest from at least, well, I didn't hear it from Tim, but I see Ray shaking his head. I heard it from Henry. And I think,
I would be one that would like to serve on it, but right now I'm totally against it for a number of reasons. And I don't even think it's worth getting into at this point, because I think that most likely it'll never come to fruition.
I got a quick example I could pass on to you. So several of you, when John could go take a look at it. when ODOT was doing the earthquake upgrades to all the High 84 bridges. I was in Troutdale as city manager. And we wanted a separate bridge for peds and bicycles. If you go take a look at that, I suggest you go into the little outlet mall that's there and drive around behind it and park there. And you'll see that what the compromise was is we built a much, much larger bicycle ped walking on one of the two bridges, the south side, the southern bridge. And then we connected that underneath the freeway on both sides of the river. And now the city's working on its urban renewal project, which will, for the bridge on the south side, will show a pathway into the urban renewal area there. But what happened is it just exploded the pedestrian improvements there, just increased everything. And again, all along, we wanted some kind of suspension bridge for the two things. And there was a big old steel railroad bridge that's a little farther south than the freeway. I think that's right. Yeah. And, but I mean, it opened up a huge regional park. There was a number of other activities there. And there's something called the Metro Loop Trail for bicycles. The fringe of that, the eastern fringe of that goes through this section.
40-mile loop.
We put lots of individual pieces into it, but the linchpin was ODOT paying for that much more secure ped and bicycle walk on one of the bridges. And then you get two-way traffic on that. But go take a look at it. It may be a realistic option since they're going to be redoing the 205 bridge just to have one section that works that way.
I could see them suspending a bridge underneath the 205 bridge. I mean, that'd be the only place that it wouldn't interfere with views and all that kind of stuff. So to enhance any businesses on the other side, probably the Oregon City Shopping Center and getting them onto the frontage road. But it would be, that could work.
I mean, just take a look at it. You may decide it's not appropriate or whatever, but it is an option.
I'll look at it. I've never seen it.
Well, the article I saw also included the thought that a bike pedestrian bridge should connect the paper mill areas across there where you could actually get some recreational use as well as transportation use. So you'd end up connecting the future development area of the mill with the walks on the West Lynn side and be able to utilize that.
Probably the cheapest thing would be putting in a tram, and that would serve everybody.
Yeah. Now, a poor man's tram would be a zip line.
Well, moving on, John.
Well, the only thing I'll say is, I think the bike advocacy groups are out there already, and really, so when I think of the three of you, if we have to prioritize, to me, it's that conversation and advocate for the Riverview, for the way the existing city works. It's those kind of things. And I know both Henry and Tim, you guys have the history with the city and understanding of that and Tim, you being a bicycle advocate, even, I don't know, when I think of who fits that best, you do feel like the right one to me, in that you're an avid bicyclist. So you're an advocate for bicycling, but you're also an advocate for, our historic downtown and our Riverview and all those kind of things. So, that would be an important voice, because I'm worried that we lose sight of, the river. I like the idea of a bridge being, up near the mill sites. But that could have an impact on, I mean, half the pictures of the falls are taken from the existing bridge, right? So
Mhm.
I don't know. I guess, and I know Henry could offer that too, but he's probably not as strong a bicycle advocate as you are, Tim.
I just look at the number of bikes going over that bridge, and the sidewalk is wide enough, although it's narrow when somebody's walking down the opposite direction. But when you're going downhill, everybody just hops on that road and goes as fast as the cars.
Yeah.
So I just don't see the amount of bike traffic to support an individual bridge. So,
But one element that I've heard from the biking community is, there's this kind of a loop or a much longer trail system that I didn't, I'm not a bicyclist, so it doesn't, but I mean, you've got the Clackamas the I-205 bike trail comes out of Gladstone. You got, the Portland Avenue that goes into Portland on the other bike trail. I forget what that's called. But anyway, those converge in Oregon City, and you can go south on those, but again, other than riding through downtown Oregon City and up and over the Oregon City Westland Bridge and completing that route, which takes you out Willamette River Drive, is not as safe as I think a lot of the bicyclists would like it to be, nor as direct, right? They'd probably like to just hop on a bridge, like you said, suspended under I-205 and be able to make that route and hook up with what Westland's got planned for bike routes along there, on their side of the river. So I think there's a lot more there, and maybe even some economic development associated with that. But
the original layout for that in Oregon City was to come down from the old 82nd Street Bridge, like it is now, go around Clackamas Park, past McDonald's, and past the marina, and then they envisioned some way, quote, of getting across the river to West Lynn down near the Arch Bridge. But it was always, that was the route that was envisioned as being improved.
So the bicycle paths for semi-serious cyclists, you can do loops that go all the way up to the Selwood Bridge and around the Steel Bridge and come on back. That's a nice loop from here. Another one, you go to the Selwood Bridge, you go up to the cemetery, you come back to Willigern, come over the old Oregon City Bridge. The next bridge south of Oregon City is the Canby Ferry. So that is a very popular cycling route, but there are no good bike paths that connect Oregon City, West Lynn, going down River Road and then up over Pete's Mountain to get over there. You're on roads that don't have a very wide bike path in them at all. But
You're on roads that don't have any bike path and not very wide travel lanes for cars.
Fortunately, there's not very many cars on that route either. So, but those are the loops that serious cyclists take around here.
see, Tim, you're selling yourself. I think you've cinched it for me. We'll get you on a committee. How's that?
I'd like to add to this conversation that whether Oregon City wants to become an 8 to 80 city, which I don't know if you know what that means, but just because a lot of people in discussion are saying about the strong and fearless cyclists, or the training cyclists, and personally, I want to see the city become an 8 to 80 city where an 8-year-old child and an 80-year-old grandparent are comfortable biking on a street, and that's not a training cyclist. So that's the vision for the Oregon City Bridge that I am advocating for. So that's just my viewpoint.
And Ray, that'd be really nice, but I think the geography of Oregon City Westland doesn't allow for 8 and 80-year-old people to be riding up hills, and because No matter what direction you head out of Oregon City, you've got hills, serious hills. And I think that to enhance River Road would be much better. There's the trolley trail that's really nice and very well used, but we don't have that kind of access here or trail system yet. Until John builds that wonderful trail around Oregon City, we're going to be stuck with what we got.
So can we move on?
Yeah, one more short thing I wanted to share, Henry. It's like preview. This is actually a draft video that I wanted to share for you guys, but let's see, Kim, you're gonna have to let me share screen to do this.
You should be able to, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So this is fresh off the press. Nobody's seen it yet, or nobody important has seen it yet, except for staff, and we're not that important. But so this is the Myers Road kind of opening video. So Myers Road is gonna tomorrow night. They're actually gonna open Myers Road up to traffic. So they've got to transition the signal there, so they're doing that at night. I don't exactly know what time they're going to open it, but I suspect it'll be past all our bedtimes. But if you're really interested in that, you might do a midnight venture to see if it's open, and if not, you can get up super early if you want to be one of the first ones on Myers Road to do that. But this little video came together, and I thought I'd show it real quick. Can you hear it?
No, I can't hear it.
Yeah, no sound.
You have to share your sound. There's some way to do that.
Wow.
Pretty cool, though.
That's going to be one nice drive.
Well, yeah, I'll just have to show the video then. I didn't realize, I don't know how to share.
The path is cool too. I've been biking on it to the campus for the last few weeks. It's open already. The path is.
Well, this will be up soon. Unfortunately, I didn't think about sound. I guess I've never tried that. I'm not sure why that doesn't work, but
John, could you explain the three lanes
road, though.
that are on Myers Road there?
Say that again, Tim.
Could you explain those lanes? It looks like there's 3 lanes per direction. It looks like parking, and then maybe a bike, and then you got a 2-foot wide parallel line.
So that's the buffered bike lane. So there's it's basically a 3-lane vehicle section, 2 lanes, 1 east, 1 west, and then the center turn lane. And then there's on each side, there's a 2-foot buffer, what we call so that gap between where the travel lane is at. And I forget the travel lane widths, but they're pretty wide too. And then the bike lanes. And then in some places there's on-street parking, other places there's not. And there's the connection, that right there, what you're looking at is the connection to the college. And right across from there will be, a future connection to whatever development happens to the south. We've got one development application that's in for an office building along that roadway already. And then of course, the park is being developed. So, yeah, so again, I'm sorry you can't hear the messaging because there's a lot there to hear as well, including the community college contribution and their acknowledgement of a past president that had been there many years. So anyway, we'll get this up. I didn't think about sound. I apologize for that. And I was excited to share it with you because I just saw it today for the first time.
I personally think it's a pretty good deal because it's something that I know the city's been working toward for about 30 years.
Yeah, that's all I have, and I'll stop sharing.
I got a question for you, John. What happened up on Moala Saturday?
A couple things. The road closure, you mean?
Yeah.
Was that Saturday or Friday night?
It could have been Friday night, Saturday. I heard it was like a sinkhole.
Oh, maybe. No, it was Saturday night. You're right, I think. Yeah. Yeah, it was just, it was related to some, all the franchise utilities are trying to get their utility lines replaced or moved. And so our phone utility had tried to complete a boring across Malala Avenue. And in doing that, they had to do some vacuum excavation work along the existing utilities to identify all those. And I think they did a good job with vacuuming all that material, but they didn't fill it back with anything. So there was about every 4 feet on center, there was a hole that they had cut in the pavement and plated with a little plate that goes in the ground. But the material underneath that, they vacuumed all that out of there and they never put it back. So that pavement just finally gave away and nobody realized that they hadn't paved it back. So pretty significant cave in and sinkhole there. So that's that. I think a couple of cars hit it actually before police got called. And I don't know if there's damage there associated with that, but police shut the road, and that night the contractor and the city both responded and they got some nice big steel sheet over it to bridge it.
Is there think there are going to be any more up that way?
Sinkholes like that?
Yeah.
I hope not.
Yeah.
I hope not. Yeah, we've been dealing with some pretty significant potholes because that pavement section, the existing pavement section we knew was pretty poor. Yeah,
that's not a pothole.
That was not a pothole. That was something else.
Yeah.
The other thing that we did there, which I was concerned with when I saw it, because I saw it that night, we were on our way to dinner, and we put in a 3-way stop, or actually a 4-way stop, because there's a driveway on one side there, but right on First Street now, we actually got a citizen who suggested that was a need, and we know that we're going to have a signal there in the future. So we thought, well, we might as well get the traveling public used to having to do that stop anyway. So we put in a temporary stop sign. And when I saw the flashing lights from the police car, I was pretty sure that was an accident there, but I was fortunate. To me, it was better to hear about the sinkhole than it was to hear about somebody getting hit.
I agree. Thank you.
One thing before we get off, so all your notes and your recommendation forms, I'll need to get those from you so I can send them off to Katie Riggs for the interview applicant tonight. And you also do need to fill in Ben Simmons' name on the recommendation form, even though we didn't re-interview him, if you want to recommend him. And then you can fill your name in too.
So, Kimberly, since I was late, can you just have me abstain from that?
Yeah, so I can forward you, this has all been recorded. So if you'd like to watch it from the beginning, John, I can forward you the link so you can actually see it. Or if you would rather, that's fine too. I know your term is expiring, so.
Short termer.
Yeah, I understand.
And with that, I'd like to thank you, John, for all the years you've been on this committee, because I know you've been on it for a very long time.
Not as long as Bob, though, I think.
Well, I think we're both pretty close together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've enjoyed it, so I'll take it as a compliment that you have the grand opening of Myers Road in 2 weeks just before I was finished my term. So it's good.
Yeah.
Good to have a big project go out like that, even though it's mostly staff and grants and that kind of stuff.
It was all you're doing, John. You can take all the credit you want to for that one. That's fine. I do have a question though. So I guess we don't deliberate on the candidate, but in I met with Vance Tong and John both to kind of get a little debrief. Vance brought up the fact that and reminded me that he's the chamber representative, and Ben, I don't know if he talked to you about this, but you're a businessman and are you a chamber member as well?
I'm not. And when you actually asked that question, I was going to ask you later if that's something you want me to look into pursuing in that avenue of things.
Well, you know, the chamber they may have different ideas. I don't know. So yeah, I know that that's a need. So we could suggest, if you're interested in becoming a chamber member and representing them on that, I think it'd be better for us to ask them that if they'd like to do that, or maybe they have somebody else in the waiting.
Well,
I don't know.
John,
I'm
the,
happy to do so, but don't we also have one additional space still open that we could utilize that if they had somebody else in mind?
yes. And John, the candidate that withdrew her application, she was a member of the chamber. But it's a moot point because she withdrew, but I just thought I'd put that out there.
So I mean, if you want to reach out to them, if they have a candidate in mind, by all means, you know, we can utilize that extra space. If they want me to act as a liaison and start participating and help them with a voice, then I'd be happy to do that as well.
Kim,
It does add another meeting, because they meet as a subcommittee, and that was kind of the idea, was you'd be sharing updates.
Yeah.
Tim, you were going to say something? Are you?
could you send me that form that you want filled out for the candidate?
It should have been in the agenda packet, I think.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was in the early one that had the candidates
The one with the resume in it.
recommendation or application. It was down near the end of all that, about 10 or 15 pages, 10 or 11 or 11 and 12.
So Kim, can you reach out to the chamber and find out, you know, if they're, you know, what they're thinking?
Yeah,
And I don't want, you know, I don't want Ben to jump through any hoops if they've already got somebody else in mind. And you know, I think Ben was willing if they don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
yep.
yeah. Hey, Sedamir, I know we don't have your picture up, but it's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while.
Oh, you might have fallen asleep.
My internet not so fast, so
Got it.
I can listen to you guys and watch things.
Well, with that, I don't know, Henry, but I hope you folks all have a great holiday season, and we'll pick this up again in 2021, and maybe we'll actually get to meet in person at some point in 2021, hopefully.
Sure hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. I missed the pizza.
Well, Merry Christmas to you all. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, everyone.
All right.
Happy New Year.
Okay, then I'll
Motion
take
to
this as a request to adjourn the meeting. We stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Have a great holiday, everybody.
Bye.
All right.